Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 10th edition of the Saturday Seminars, an initiative by Department of Philosophy, University of Lucknow. Today we have Professor Kantilal Das from Department of Philosophy, North Bengal University. He'll be delivering a talk on the philosophical relevance of linguistic revolution. So I'll just begin with the brief introduction of Professor Kantilal Das and I'll read out his CV. So Professor Kantilal Das is a senior most professor since 2009 of Department of Philosophy, North Bengal University. He has written 8 books such as The Philosophical Relevance of Language, a methodological reflection, 2005, Symbolic Logic in Bengali Medium, 2012, Language, Truth and Logic, 2012, A Handbook of Set Theory, 2014, Language and Reality, jointly edited, 2006, Language and Ontology, jointly edited, 2008, Language, Value and Culture, East-West Comparative Study, jointly edited, 2008 to 2009, Language and Communication, edited 2018. He has completed two major projects under the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi, during 1913 to 14 and 1916 to 1918 financial years. He has also completed 5 minor research projects under UGC scheme financed by North Bengal University. He has more than 45 publications in various national and international journals. Under his supervision, 15 candidates already awarded PhD and 17 international journals. He is teaching at PG level since 10th February 1994 onwards. He was former director of UGC HRDC NBU for 3.5 years, and he was deputy commissioner of Ambedkar Study Center for 5 years. He was the deputy coordinator of UGC SAP for 6 years. Right now, he is a coordinator of UGC SAP DRS 3. He is holding this post since last 5 years. He has been deeply engaged with the academic works of the various universities, higher education, and UGC. He visited Japan, Hiroshima, Singapore for attending international conferences and presented papers. He has been conferred Shiksha Ratna Award 2020 by the West Bengal government, West Bengal. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Nikita Singh for reading abstract.
Good afternoon to everyone. The theme of today's webinar is the philosophical relevance of linguistic revolution. During the first half of the 20th century, philosophy witnessed a revolution or turn known as linguistic revolution or linguistic turn. The objective of any revolution, philosophical or non-philosophical, is to disintegrate the existing system, theory, or policy. The same is true in the case of the linguistic revolution. The main objective of the linguistic revolution is to disintegrate the foundation of speculative metaphysics. What was wrong in metaphysics? In this regard, it has been said that the metaphysics was born out of a misinterpretation and misapprehension of language. This linguistic revolution is based on a few philosophical agendas, such as first, all philosophical problems are linguistic in nature. Second, all traditional and conventional philosophical problems arose due to the misunderstanding and misapprehension of language. Third, proper analysis and clarification of language would be the main agenda of philosophy. Fourth, metaphysics is just like a dead body because metaphysical assertions are meaningless. Fifth, philosophy must be a progressive science, just like other natural sciences. On the basis of this question, they developed two philosophical theories, such as linguistic philosophy and philosophy of language. They are just like the two sides of the same coin. This lecture is primarily concerned with linguistic philosophy rather than the philosophy of language. It will take language as a philosophical method. Thank you. And over to you, Mansi.
Thank you, Nikita. Now I would like to invite Professor K.C. Pandey, Head of the Department of Philosophy, University of Lucknow, to deliver a formal welcome. Thank you. Please, sir, over to you.
Uh, Very good afternoon, everybody, and very good afternoon to Professor Das in particular. A very good afternoon to everybody, and very good afternoon to Professor Das in particular, that he accepted my invitation to deliver this Saturday seminar today. We are really welcoming him with all emotions, with all respect, and we are really grateful that you are here, sir, to deliver Saturday seminar on linguistic philosophy. Scholars, this is a platform of the scholars of Department of Philosophy, University of Lucknow, and we are trying to connect with not only scholars but everybody in India and abroad, whosoever is interested. So I welcome you, sir, Professor Das, and it was very wonderful to visit your university few months back, and I welcome everybody associated with this Saturday seminar, all the teachers of Department of Philosophy and all the teachers across India, LWPS members from Bhubaneswar, Guwahati, and Delhi and other places. It's not possible to take everybody's name. Please understand my limitations that due to time constraints. But I see here Arun Chaudhary also available and here in this Saturday seminar, and Chaudhary is a very good friend of mine. So Arun, most welcome. And one day I suppose that you'll also deliver here in the Saturday seminar, Dr. Arun Chaudhary and others. So with this brief welcome note, I invite Professor Das to deliver his talk. Professor Das, sir, please deliver. Take your time. Be comfortable.
Yeah,
Be comfortable, sir. So now
okay,
this,
sir,
yeah, dice is yours.
my voice is hearing to you, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. So very good afternoon to everybody. It is indeed a privilege to me to be a part of this deliberation. Rakesh is smiling and other colleagues are there. I am grateful to Rakesh, a very innovative person. So thank you, Rakesh, for your kind presence in this seminar. Actually, from my childhood, I heard the name of Lucknow University in Lucknow city. It is a premier city in India, having a lot of historical and cultural background. And the Department of Philosophy of Lucknow University had a great historical and cultural background as well. And recently I visited the department of Lucknow University and as well as Lucknow University. There are just some of the famous architectures I actually see in the Lucknow University, which actually touches upon the stream of my life as well. So it is a beautiful initiative taken by the Department of Philosophy of Lucknow University, particularly the head of the Department of Philosophy in the pandemic situation. I feel privileged to be a part of this deliberation. Actually, the tentative title of my presentation has been outlined and read out. It is tentatively titled as Philosophical Relevance of Linguistic Regulation. Not a new concept. It has a prolonged history, I think. Every philosophical student belonging to the linguistic philosophy or analytic philosophy have some insight about the revolution. Actually, certainly in the first few decades of the century, particularly 1930 to 1945. Within these two decades, certainly philosophy witnessed a linguistic turn or linguistic revolution in a philosophy. Now let me think about the perspective and the background of this revolution. Now, what do you mean by revolution? Why actually the society or community or any other I think it's a circle, whatever it may be, witnessed a revolution. Actually, in philosophy, there is a famous revolution, what is known as Copernicus revolution, which is related to Kantian philosophy. Very similar to that, within the first few decades of 20th century, we witnessed a linguistic revolution. Now, when a revolution actually appeared, it appeared against the well-established philosophical theory. You think about the Kantian revolution or Copernicus revolution in comparison. Actually, before Kant, it was said that knowledge conforms to object. But Kant actually claimed just the opposite. Kant says that the object conforms to knowledge. So it is fully diametrically opposite. And that's why it is called the revolutions. And Kantian theory has been compared with Copernicus revolution. Now coming back to the concept of linguistic revolution. Now linguistic revolution appear against the background or backdrop of metaphysics, particularly speculative metaphysics. My dear friend, it is known to all of us that we have four different branches of philosophy: logic, epistemology, ethics, and religion. And among these four branches of philosophy, I cognize metaphysics is the main branches of philosophy. It has two diametrical opposite advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that because of metaphysics, philosophy has been regarded as the queen of all subjects. You know that all natural sciences are confined within empirical phenomenal world, but philosophy has the capacity and dignity to think about what lies outside the empirical world and metaphysical world. So that is why philosophy has been said the queen of all subjects. It discusses everything what other natural sciences cannot do. And the disadvantage of metaphysics is that because of metaphysical resolutions, philosophy has been criticized or at times sidelined by other discipline as well. So metaphysics is the glory of philosophy in the one hand, and it has a disadvantage. Whether it is reality or not, it is another question altogether, because philosophy has to pay a lot. Now, what is wrong with metaphysics? Why there is linguistic revolution? Now, as I have already mentioned, that linguistic turn or linguistic revolutions came against the backdrop of metaphysics. Now, what is wrong with metaphysics? Simplistically, it can be said that metaphysical assertions are meaningless. A lot of backgrounds are there. Metaphysical assertions are meaningless. So, philosophy must be a meaningful enterprise. This was the actually underlying slogan of the linguistic turn. Now you know that there are like-minded philosophers that is associated with the Cambridge Society and Vienna circles. They were like-minded philosophers. Like-minded philosopher in the sense that they actually were engaged with interdisciplinary subjects. They actually at that time took philosophy as their subject and also having a background of mathematics, science, computer science, and other. Okay, so that is why they are called a like-minded philosopher. And there are a number of like-minded philosophers. They thought at that time that there is something wrong in philosophy. There is something wrong in philosophy, particularly in metaphysics. Actually, metaphysics is dealing with some philosophical assertions having no scientific background. So, if philosophy is confined within the orbit or within the realm of or realm of metaphysics, then in the real sense of the term, there is no progress or development in philosophy. For them, that you think that the concept of, that is the philosophical concept that has been taught or discussed 1,000 years back from Plato, Aristotle onwards, are being taught even in the 21st century or 19th century. So philosophy is hovering within a particular domain or orbit. And in this sense, there is no real development or progress in philosophy. Philosophy, if it is dominated by metaphysics, is just like a closed door analysis. Today, I actually assume a comparison between the position of metaphysician with the COVID-19 patient. Now, right now, we are experiencing COVID-19, the pandemic situation. So, in the pandemic situation, we are actually living with some irrationality of choices according to Camus. That is, now we are actually leading a life where we actually invite some irrational choices instead of rational choices. Before COVID-19 or before December 2020, that is, we are leading a life with a rational choice. Now, suddenly, with the environment of COVID-19, we are actually taking some irrational choice as the ingredients of leading our life. Now, within the irrational choices, there are home quarantine, social distancing, and lockdowns. These situations are there at present. Now, metaphysicians actually experience such type of situations within the time of linguistic revolution. They were sidelined by the linguistic revolution. They were actually dismantled or disintegrated by the revolution. So actually, metaphysicians' positions were very similar to the position of COVID-19 that we are experiencing in the pandemic situation. So I think this is a beautiful comparison that we can make at these times. So linguistic revolutions, actually the philosopher belonging to the linguistic revolutions asserted that metaphysics is simply just like a dead body. Dead body means that it has no significance, philosophical significance. It is dealing with some such philosophical assertions having no scientific background. They cannot be experienced, they cannot be proved in any theoretical means or any accredited philosophical systems or domains or whatever it may be. So there is a view is that metaphysics is simply meaningless. Metaphysics has to be rejected. If philosophers are confined within metaphysics in the days to come, then there is no value in philosophy. Philosophy would be progressive less. And this was the insight of the linguistic revolution. Now the question is why metaphysical assertions are meaningless and what is wrong with metaphysics? How metaphysics has been generated or survived hundreds and hundreds of years if there is something wrong in metaphysics. How metaphysics sees the important ground of philosophy. Why philosophy has been designated as the queen of metaphysical assertion. If all these things are accepted over years, then why suddenly in the eyes of linguistic revolution, metaphysics has been rejected or it has been rejected as a meaningless enterprise. These are the some important questions that needs to be taken care of when we are dealing with the philosophical relevance of linguistic turn or linguistic revolutions in short. Now, what is wrong with metaphysics? How metaphysics has been generated or how metaphysics has been developed over the years and survived over the years with glory. This is the important philosophical questions and ontological questions so far I perceived. Now, according to the linguistic philosopher, that is metaphysics was born out of misinterpretation of language. This is the main issue. Thus, metaphysics was born out of misinterpretation of language. Metaphysics was generated out of misinterpretation of language. So, when it is said that metaphysics was generated out of misinterpretation of language, naturally the question arises, there are two interpretations of languages. One is actual or real interpretation of language and another is misinterpretation of language. Now, to claim that metaphysics are generated out of misinterpretation of language, we have to explain what is the actual interpretation of language. Now, the actual interpretation of language uh, eh, actually is. Hello, am I hearing, sir? Am I hearing, sir?
Very much, very much, very much.
Okay, thank you. Now let me clarify what is the distinction between actual use of language and the non-actual or misinterpretation of language. Now, what is language? First, let me clarify what is language. Now, in the layman interpretation, it is claimed that language is a medium of communication between the speaker and the hearer. So in the case of this is the general definition of a language. It is not the philosophical definition of language. Language is a medium of communication between the speaker and the hearer. So in the process of communication, there are two parties. One is the hearer as well as the speaker. So communication is made possible within the orbit of binary relationship. There are two as the speaker and the hearer, and between the speaker and the hearer, the communication is made possible. Now, what do we communicate? When we communicate by means of language, this is another important interpretation. Okay, so naturally, it is known to all of you that is when communication is made possible. Then that is we do communicate our feeling, emotions, sentiment, thoughts, and everything. We can communicate everything. Okay, and another important thing is that when we do communicate as a speaker or hearer, whatever it may be, it is our moral responsibility to make our communication successful. This is another important thing. That is, we have the responsibility. When we engage in the process of communication, we have the responsibility to make our communication successful. Now, again, the question arises, how do we assure that our communication would be successful? Is there a non-successful communication? Of course, there are a non-successful communication. But in most general cases, when we do engage within the process of communication, within the system of communication, it is the responsibility of both the hearer as well as the speaker to make our communication successful. Now, how do we make our communication successful? Because if our communication remains to be unsuccessful, then it is a default of the language as well as the default of the capacity of speaker as well as the hearer. Now, in this regard, we can say that communication is to be successful. Communication is to be successful because we have a unified core of conceptual scheme. In this regard, we should refer to Immanuel Kant and P.F. Strawson. They were voicing in favor of unified core of conceptual scheme. As we have four categories of understanding, everyone possesses 12 categories of understanding. So they are the categories of understanding on the basis of which we are able to communicate successfully. So there are various perception as far as conceptuality is concerned. I am not entering into this process. Just as I am telling that when we to engage in the process of communication, we have to make our communication successful. And in this regard, we can follow Immanuel Kant and Strawson's book Individuals, where they claim that our communication, that is the communication between the speaker and the hearer, would be successful because we have a unified core of conceptual scheme. So I do not enter into the conceptualism because there are a serious debate about the conceptual scheme between Kant, Strawson, Quine, Davidson, and others. So this is another important journey. Here I am just telling you how our communication between the speaker and the hearer is successful. Now, in the process of communication, we share our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our sentiment, and our stream of life and everything. Okay, so if our communication is, if our communication fails to do it, then of course it would be a nonsense communication. Now, metaphysical assertion are nonsense. Metaphysical assertion are nonsense in the sense that metaphysical assertions are born out of misinterpretation of language. That is, metaphysical assertions are born out of misinterpretation of language because metaphysics actually deals with some supernatural entities. Say, for example, God, soul, mind, and the imaginary objects, and so on and so forth. Now, all these objects, according to linguistic philosophers, are imaginary objects. They are not examined with the perspective of space and time. They cannot be verified by any accredited philosophical method. They cannot be verified through sense experience. They cannot be cognized through reason. They cannot be tested even in the laboratory. So human beings have some accredited methods or processes on the basis of which we can testify or verify or falsify whatever it may be the philosophical assertion. Philosophy is a broad subject. It is a complex subject. There is no boundary in philosophy. There is nothing absolutely certain in philosophy. The history of philosophy is the pyramid based on argumentation and counter argumentation and nothing else. So anybody can do any philosophy. Anybody can make any philosophical assertion. But the person who are doing a philosophy and asserts something and is claiming something as knowledge has the responsibility to make it a proof, either the convincingly system of the knowledge. Now the problem with metaphysics is that metaphysics has been regarded as a closed door of analysis. It's a closed their eyes to do philosophy. It has been designated as a closed door analysis. It is not at all as associated with our phenomenal world, with our world of experience. It is saying something beyond the phenomenal world or beyond the nominal world or the world of experience. Now the scientific minded philosopher, that is the like minded philosopher, has raised the question: how do we come to know about something which are not an integral part of the natural world, or which are not something integral part of the empirical world, which are not something that can be experienced, which are not something that can be cognized, which are not something that can be verified? These are so much of forceful revolutionary criticism go against a metaphysician. Now, let me say how metaphysics actually survived over the years. According to linguistic philosopher, metaphysics survived over the years because of misinterpretation of language. Now, let me clarify this point. Say, for example, what is God? Okay, so what is God? God did not exist. God is not existing, and God will not exist in the days to come, in the real sense of the term. But the people are saying it about God. Now, if my student just say that, sir, I have a faith on God, and if I raise the question from the philosophical perspective and linguistic perspective, how do you come to know about God? He would just say that, sir, God is something omnipotent. I am telling you, God is something omnipotent, all powerful, all vicious, and so on and so forth. Now the term here has been used is the omnipotent, all powerful, all vicious. These are linguistic as a term. Now my student actually takes the advantage of some linguistic as a coins or the high profile linguistic attributes that is imposed on the God. So actually he takes the help of language in order to clarify what he understands about the God. So God is nowhere, even with reference to Wittgenstein, letter Wittgenstein, we can say that God does not exist. If there is God, it is embedded in language. If there is God, it is embedded in language. So actually, metaphysics is nothing but the creation of the misinterpretation of language. That is, we are actually describing metaphysical entities, any sort of entities, whatever it may be, with the help of the language, with the help of language. But such type of language are articulated out of imagination and out of a high fantasy. So metaphysics is a bogus issue. Metaphysics is not at all related with real objects or whatever it may be. This was the slogan of the linguistic revolution or linguistic turn that appeared in the past few decades of 20th century, and the revolution is a ghost against metaphysics, is disintegrated as a metaphysics, is abolished metaphysics, particularly speculative as a metaphysics, not all types of as a metaphysics, and it is a divorce as a metaphysics as meaningless entity. So this is the background of the linguistic revolution or the linguistic turn. So the resolution is just like that according to the linguistic philosopher. So number one, all traditional metaphysical problems were created or were engendered out of misinterpretation of language. This is one important resolution of linguistic philosophy. Second, philosophical problems are linguistics in nature. All philosophical problems are linguistic nature. That is, in this regard, we can refer Wittgenstein. He was a consistent linguistic as a philosopher. He did everything with the help of the language. Okay, so all philosophical problems are linguistics in nature. All philosophical problems are created as out of misinterpretation of language. All traditional philosophical problems were engendered due to the misinterpretation of language. Therefore, philosophy is all about the clarification of language. Now, if we overcome the linguistic defaults or any sort of linguistic misinterpretation, whatever it may be, we have to understand the logic of language, the meaning of language, the underlying structure of the language. So this was the slogan of the linguistic revolution. So the final resolution is that metaphysics has to be rejected as a meaningless entity. Metaphysics is not at all meaningful. Metaphysical assertions are meaningless. Philosophy must be interpreted under the home of clarification and analysis of language. Philosophy is all about the clarification of language. This is the final voice of linguistic turn or linguistic as a revolution. And in this way, this revolution has its own enter into the philosophy and sees a new ground within the sphere of the philosophy. It is rejected as a metaphysics. It is rejected metaphysics and sees the ground of the metaphysics in the name of linguistic as a philosophy. Now I am talking about linguistic philosophy, not the philosophy of language. Many students belonging to this sphere of the thought do not know about the subtle distinction between the philosophy of language and linguistic philosophy. David Cooper, a phenomenal thinker belonging to this camp, in his book actually found the distinction between the philosophy of language and linguistic philosophy. Now, linguistic philosophy is a philosophical method. I am telling you, my dear friend, linguistic philosophy is a philosophical method, but philosophy of language is not a philosophical method. Okay. Now, what is the distinction between the philosophy of language and linguistic philosophy? Now, philosophy of language actually deals with some linguistic concept. Philosophy of language deals with some linguistic concepts such as meaning, reference, truth, denotation, connotation, etc. On the other hand, linguistic philosophy is a philosophical method. What is the task of linguistic philosophy? The task of linguistic philosophy is to show the relationship between language and reality by way of clarifying the underlying meaning of language. So the distinction is very clear. One is dealing with some linguistic concept, another is dealing with philosophical method. We have other philosophical method known to all of us. That is, we have phenomenological method. We have a Cartesian method. Turco has been regarded as a method, and there are various method in logic as well. So linguistic method is also an introduction of philosophical method, which actually brings a revolution within philosophy. It attempts to show the relationship between language and reality just by way of interpreting the underlying meaning of language, the underlying logic of the language. This is all about of the linguistic methods. Now, I am primarily concerned with the linguistic method or linguistic philosophy, not about the philosophy of language. But my dear friends, I think they are very close concept. Linguistic philosophy and philosophy of language are very close concept. If you interpret one, you involve it into the other. Very simplistically, we can say that they are the two sides of the same coin. But you being a student of philosophy of language must be aware about the subtle distinction between philosophy of language and linguistic as a philosophy. I think the distinction is clear to all of you. Now I enter to the linguistic as a philosophy. Okay. Again, as I said that So there are the final resolution of linguistic revolution is that philosophy is all about the clarification of language. Philosophy is language, and language is philosophy. All traditional philosophical problems are linguistics in nature. All traditional philosophical problems can be solved or resolved or dissolved just by analysis the meaning of language. So the analysis of the meaning of language, which is modern term, which is in modern term known as the problem of meaning, is the key concept of linguistic as a philosophy. So to solve the problem of meaning, to know about the problem of meaning is the genesis of the philosophy of language or linguistic as a philosophy. So the resolution is final. The resolution is final, and the final resolution comes in the form that metaphysics, speculative metaphysics has been rejected. Now philosophy is all about the clarification of language. Now the vital question arises: what would be the nature of language? The resolution is final. That is linguistic philosopher has won the battle. This is the ground of the metaphysics. Metaphysics has been as a sideline. Metaphysics has been sent to the quarantine. Metaphysics has been as a locked. Okay. Now the ground has been seized by the linguistic philosopher. Now their bias is that all philosophical problems are linguistics in nature. Now the question is, what should be the nature of language? What should be the nature of language? Is any kind of language would be treated or capable to show the relationship between language and reality? And here there is a debate among the linguistic as a philosopher, and the debate is very fascinating. Okay, on the basis of which the whole host of linguistic as a philosophy has been developed under the name of pragmatics, semantics, and syntax. Now, what is the debate? The debate is that some would say that the ordinary language is ambiguous. The ordinary language, by its very nature, is ambiguous. Okay, it is vague, it is unperspicuous. So, ordinary language cannot be regarded as the method of linguistic as a philosophy. So they are the anti-ordinary language as a philosopher. For them, we need a specific type of language. We need a specific type of language which is suitable for dealing with the relationship between the language and the reality. And on the contrary, there is another group of philosophers who said that no, ordinary language is all right. There is no problem in ordinary language. Language is just like a sharpened tool. It has multifarious uses. Language is capable of expressing any thought whatsoever. Now, what is wrong with the language? Language itself is not responsible for creating a vagueness. Rather, it is the user of language. It is the user of language who would be responsible for creating misinterpretation by means of language. So the debate is fascinating, and it is known as the debate of ordinary as well as ideal language philosophers. Professor Pandey, am I hearing, sir?
Yeah, yes, very much,
Hello,
sir.
Professor Pandey?
Perfect.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So the debate is fascinating, and the debate actually is confined within ordinary language philosophers and ideal language philosophers regarding the very nature of language. And there is actually a very fascinating theory has been developed within the arena of linguistic philosophy. It is known as linguistic revisionism. It is known as linguistic revisionism. So there are two groups of the philosopher of language, linguistic philosopher. One voices in favor of ordinary language, and another voices in favor of the ideal language. So on the basis of this tussle, there is developed two prominent philosophical theories. One is led by the semanticist, another is led by the pragmatist, on the basis of the subtle distinction between the ordinary language and ideal language. So now let me just show about the problems of ordinary language. Again, I would like to say, I think Binod Jadhav, please, you mute your, Binod Jadhav, please, you mute your voice, please, mute your voice, Binod Jadhav. Anyway, so there are two wings. One is ideal language philosophers, and another is ordinary language philosophers. So, for the sake of the students, I would like to say that is Leda Wittgenstein, Gilbert Ryle, P.F. Strawson, Austin, Moore, and many others actually lead to the ordinary language philosophy. And on the contrary, Early Wittgenstein, Bertrand Russell, J.S. Mill, J.S. Mill, Tusky, and Frege, and Kripke, and Marcus, and many others actually led to the ideal language philosophy. Okay, so on the basis of that, there develops an important philosophical concept, what is known as the concept of linguistic revisionism. So there are views for and against about linguistic revisionism, and on the basis of that, I have already mentioned two broad, important, philosophical theories developed in the name of pragmatics as well as in the name of semantics. Now, according to the ideal language as a philosopher, ordinary language is ambiguous. Let me think about ordinary language is ambiguous. Why ordinary language is ambiguous? According to them, there are just so many words. There are just so many words such actually having just so many meaning and interpretation in various contexts. Say for example, the word bank. There are two meaning. One meaning of bank is that where monetary transaction is going on, and another meaning of the word bank is that the seaside. Okay. Now and another word they for say for example sandaf. Sandaf, that is in English it is salt, and it is different interpretation. When a person actually is going to take a meal and use the word sandaf, I think it means salt, and when he dressed oil equipped and go to somewhere, it means the horse and so forth. So ordinary language actually is ambiguous, having multifarious uses. Ordinary language for Wittgenstein is just like a tool in a toolbox, having multifarious uses, having dimensional uses. Same word is used in different situation differently by different person or by the same person. So it is very difficult to tackle the dimension of ordinary language, the versatile uses of ordinary language by most of the people. As a result of that, the confusions frequently arise within the use of ordinary language. Okay, so this is the main objection raised against ordinary language. Now, those who favor ordinary language, they would say that there is nothing wrong regarding the versatile use of ordinary language. Rather, it is the good quality of the ordinary language. Now, the problem, if there is any problem within the ordinary language, actually the users are responsible for that. If the user is having no mastery, having no authenticity of our ordinary language, then all sorts of problems would be created. But as a language, the ordinary language is all right. And in this regard, we can particularly mention Wittgenstein's. There are other ordinary language philosophers, particularly Ryle, Austin's, and Austin's and others who actually favor a certain sort of revision within the ordinary language. But Wittgenstein denies any sort of revision of ordinary language. Wittgenstein, in his letter Wittgenstein particularly has claimed that ordinary language has all right. There is no need for revision of ordinary language. And even if there is any revision, it is revision within ordinary language. It does not mean to formulate a different type of language. So this is fascinating view of Wittgenstein. But there are other philosophers of ordinary language who are a moderate philosopher. They actually recognize or acknowledge the ambiguity of ordinary language. But in generally, it can be said the proponent of ordinary language, in some sense or other, having the perception or inclination that even if there is some ambiguity in ordinary language itself is not responsible. Rather, it is the user of the language who are responsible because of their limitation about the function of language or the underlying meaning of language. So this is all about the view of ordinary language. Now the point is that whatever the situation may be, whether it is from the part of language or it is from the user of language, whatever it may be, there is a possibility of making mistaken in ordinary language, either from the it comes either from the nature of language or the user of language having lacking authenticity about the language, they actually were duped by language, whatever it may be. But the simplistic resolution is that there is a possibility of making mistakes in ordinary language. So if there is any possibility, it is better for us to divorce ordinary language, and instead of ordinary language, we should formulate a new kind of language which would be capable to show the relationship between language and reality in a vivid manner, in a precise manner, and in an authentic manner. So this is the resolution of the semantics. And you know that semantics is a big schools. Okay, all logicians are semantics, all reductionists are semantics, all scientists are semantics, all computer sciences are semantics. Okay, so semantics is a big school. But when we are confining ourselves within the semantics, within the philosophy of language, we are primarily concerned with those peoples who actually talk in favor of revision of ordinary language. I am confining within this as a particular semanticist, and in this category, we can mention the name of Bertrand Russell, Ali Wittgenstein, Gottlob Frege, Kripke, and many other semantics. Now, let me explain their views about the relationship between language and reality. Please don't mind, I am doing linguistic philosophy. I am not talking about philosophy of language. I am doing linguistic philosophy, taking linguistic philosophy as a philosophical method. Okay, so linguistic philosophy, the main task of linguistic philosophy is to show the relationship between the language and reality. On the one side, there is language, another side there is reality, and the relationship between language and the reality. And this is an articulated system. It is not a natural system. Why it is called as an articulated system? It is called articulated systems because here language is articulated, here language is idealized, here language is structure, and reality is also structure. So whenever we say the relationship between language and reality in any context, whatever it may be, within the realm of semantics, actually there are two sides. One is the articulated language, another is the articulated reality, and there is a structural isomorphism between the language and reality. So this is the proposal of the semantic. Now think about the view of Bertrand Russell. Now all semantics actually devote such ordinary language, and instead of ordinary language, they actually prefer ideal language or artificial language. Now, what would be the vocabulary of artificial language or ideal language? What would be the vocabulary? From where we get the vocabulary of creating artificial language or formulating artificial language? In this regard, they said that we choose some selective capable words from natural language, and on the basis of selection we formulate a new type of language. Okay, so from where we get the vocabulary? We will get the vocabulary from ordinary language. Now the question is, what words are capable of expressing the reality, or words should be taken from ordinary language which are capable of reflecting the reality? In this regard, the name of proper names, the name, that is the proper names, comes into being. And you students of philosophy come to know in a long way the concept of a proper name, not name. I am skipping so much things. I am not talking about name. I am talking about the proper name. Not all names are proper name. Not all names are proper name. So when I am talking about proper name, it has a specific philosophical significance. It has a specific semantic significance. Now, what is a proper name? There is a lot of theory about the concept of a proper name. So I am summarily just hinting on the fundamental aspects of the concept of proper name. That is, proper names has in broadly I am saying that proper names has two important aspects. One is every proper names denotes or connotes an object. This is the broad definition covering every aspect. Every proper names either denotes or connotes an object. Okay. Now, if this is the definition taken into account, then again Russell has some problem. Russell has some problem. Russell says, no, not all proper names would be genuine proper name. Russell in is a very short article, knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description, published in is the problem of philosophy. You philosophy student, you should go through this article. It is a 3 or 4 pages article where he instantly actually distinguishes between knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description. Now let me just see what is the subtle distinction between knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description. Knowledge by description, according to Russell. Russell actually did not satisfy about the general perception of the concept of proper name. According to Russell, proper names again be classified into two types. One is called logically proper name, and another is called ordinary proper name. So Russell finds two different types of proper name. One is ordinary proper name, another is logically proper name. And then Russell says that a logically proper name is a proper name which is known by acquaintance. This is the very important concept of Russell's. A logically proper name is a proper name which is known by acquaintance. On the other hand, an ordinary proper name is a proper name which is known by description. And this is where the significance of his theory of description actually lies. So if you find the philosophical significance of Russell's theory of description, you will find the significance of this description within the orbit of the distinction between knowledge by acquaintance as well as by knowledge by description. Now coming back to the concept of knowledge by acquaintance, a logically proper name denotes an object with which we are directly acquainted. With which we are directly acquainted. You people are having the knowledge of the ostensive definition. When we see a picture, it is ostensibly known. It is just a glance known to me. Okay, so very similar way. That is in the case of logically proper name. That is the object object designated by the name is directly acquainted with us. That means there is no possibility, there is no relevance of description. There is no possibility, there is no relevance of description. So what are the logically proper name according to Russell? In this regard, Russell says that only demonstrative pronouns, I repeat, only demonstrative pronouns should be regarded as logically proper name. Only demonstrative is a pronoun. Now, what are the demonstrative pronoun? These, that, it. These are called demonstrative pronoun. Why they are called demonstrative pronoun? They are called demonstrative pronoun because when you utter any sentence whatsoever, in any situation whatsoever, with the word, with either of these words, this is a fan, that is a cat, this is a picture, it is a mobile phone, that is the object designated by the sentence must be acquainted with you, and there is no scope for the description. So this is the Russell genesis of the distinction between ordinary proper name and logically proper name. Now you come to understand the rigorous definition of the concept of logically proper name. According to Russell, only logically proper names are real proper name. Other are disguised description. Now coming back to ordinary proper name. What Russell says about ordinary proper name? According to Russell, an ordinary proper name looks like a proper name, but it is not a real proper name. It is a disguised description. An ordinary proper name, though looks like a proper name, really it is not a proper name. It is not a logically proper name. Rather, it is a disguised description. It is a surrogate proper name. It looks like a proper name, but in real sense, it is not a proper name. So on the basis of ordinary proper name, later on Russell develops his theory of description. That is the theory of description. So this is all about the Russellian classification of the ordinary proper name and the logically proper name. But whatever the name it may be, whether it is ordinary proper name or it is logically proper name, it belongs under the purview of semantics. I am telling you, don't confuse. That is Russell's interpretation of logically proper name as well as his interpretation of ordinary proper name belongs to the semantics. Now coming back to another interpretation. Now the gravity of Russell's interpretation is that another philosophical insight is that is actually Russell developed no sense theory of proper name. When Russell was talking in favor of logically proper name, he actually developed no sense theory of proper name. Okay, so proper name has no sense, no mode of presentation, and in this regard, Russell actually profusely differ from Frege. Okay, but when Russell was talking in favor of the description theory of proper name or ordinate proper name, he was very close to Frege. But when he was talking as a logically proper name, he was clearly distinct from Frege, because Frege emphasizes on the sense theory of the proper name. Now let me clarify a bit. What do you mean by no sense theory of a proper name? According to Russell, a proper name has no sense, no meaning, no interpretation, no mode of presentation. Okay, proper name has no description, and most importantly, according to Russell, proper name is no longer be a part of language. Logically, proper name is no longer be a part of language. Okay, if it would be a part of language, then it would have a sense, but it is not a part of language.
Hello?
So the question of its sense simply does not
Good
arise.
afternoon.
So this is another important aspect of phrases such as semantics. Now coming back to
हाँ जी,
Wittgenstein,
sir.
particularly early Wittgenstein, we will find a prolific theory of the picture theory of the meaning. As you know, every
English तो नहीं है
students
ना?
in every university in some sense or other, that is the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus is well known to all. Okay, now
पाठ
here
मिलेगा वहाँ पे,
actually
पाठ
we
लगेगा.
find a beautiful model of the pragmatic
अब बंदे
interpretation
आऊँगा.
of language or the proper name, so to speak.
कल आ
And
जाऊँगा
it
कल.
is my view there is
सुबह
some
आ जाऊँगा 11
intellectual
बजे.
robbery. I think Wittgenstein actually throughout his
Okay.
Tractatus Logico
All right.
Philosophicus uses the term as a name, but he never ever mentioned the logically proper name. He never ever mentioned logically proper name. But the dimension and the philosophical
कौन
actually
सी?
significance of his name is very close to Russell's concept of a name. But Wittgenstein was a typical philosopher in that is a very I think tricky philosophers
कोई बात
having
नहीं,
lot
मैं
of
आज मैं
insight.
संभाल लूँगा.
So he
आप क्या
technically
मतलब
used
आज
the
मैं
term
ठीक
as
है
a
मेरी कोई
name,
बात नहीं.
and he used the term as a name throughout his Tractatus
Okay,
Logico
fine.
Philosophicus in the very close to proper names or logical proper names as we have seen in Russell's. Now think about Wittgenstein model of model proper name appear in Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. Here a Wittgenstein model is beautiful, I think. You know that the whole host of Tractatus Logico Philosophicus was constituted by only 7 proposition. That is a 7 proposition. There was a poet once I read it. We are seven brothers and sisters. So there are only 7 proposition in the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, and the whole book is constituted by near about 20,000 words. Okay, first proposition is the world is all. That is the case. The world is the totality of facts. Now, now I would like to say that Wittgenstein in the first few lines of Tractatus Logico Philosophicus actually set up the whole program of his book. The world is the totality of fact. Now, on the basis of the demand that is the world is the totality of fact, Wittgenstein actually emphasizes on 2 aspects: my language and my world. The limits of my language means the limits of my world. So Wittgenstein has presupposed an articulated individual egoistic world within the paradigm of Tractarian model, particularly in the early period, where he uses the term as my language and my world. This is a sort of solipsistic interpretation. I think it is a bit of linguistic solipsisms I find. So my language and my world. Let me emphasize on these 2 words. One is my language, another is my world. What is my language? My language means the totality of proposition. My language means the totality of proposition, and my world means the totality of fact. Now, what is the totality of proposition? The totality of propositions are nothing but the collection of names. The totality of objects or the facts are nothing but the collection of the objects in an articulated manner. Now talking about the concept of proposition. Now this is again a huge philosophical concept. You my student should know that Wittgenstein actually introduced the modern truth value mechanism in his Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. Even though Frege has been designated as the father of modern elementary logics and elementary logics, but I can tell you after Aristotle, the first time actually Wittgenstein has introduced the mechanism of truth functional logic in his Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. So he has developed the first order logic, that is the truth functional logic. Now, in truth functional logic, the term of proposition is very pronounced and focused to all of us as a student of logic. Now, here the proposition is technically understood in the logical sense. every proposition must be either it's a true or false. Every proposition has two values. Either it would be expressed either in the form of to be the case, or it would be expressed either in the form of not to be the case. So Wittgenstein categorically said that every proposition has two senses. Either the proposition is true or the proposition is such a false. So his understanding of proposition is logical understanding of proposition. And another beautiful information I would like to share with you, that Wittgenstein did everything within the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus under the sphere of logical space. Okay, logical space. He did everything within the Tractatus under the sphere of logical space. Now let me find out the distinction between logical space and empirical space. And there is a famous line: what is empirically impossible is logically possible. What is empirically impossible is logically possible. So logical space contains empirical space, and it goes beyond that. So there are various situations. All possible situations are not available in the empirical world, but all possible situations are available in the logical world. So the ingenuity of logical space is that everything is there. Everything is there at the very no new information is coming later on. This is the genesis of logical space. Every situations are available at the beginning. No information will come later on. So what you will decide? You will decide on the basis of available information. As no new information will coming later on, your decision would be absolutely certain. And this is the problem of epistemology. In the case of epistemology, there is a possibility of coming as a new information in each moment. So in the case of epistemology, that is the evidence what we are talking about will come as a everywhere, will come as a, even as a 2 days, 1 hour later, and so on and so forth. So in the case of the evidence, in the case of epistemology, the set is open. Whereas in the case of logical space, the set, as far as information is concerned, is closed. So what is empirically impossible is logically possible. So this is the genuinity of logical space, and Wittgenstein actually tries to show the relationship between the language and reality within the logical space. Now, the totality of proposition is language, and the totality of the totality of fact is the world. And there is an isomorphic relationship between the elements of the language as well as the elements of the fact. And Wittgenstein uses the term that is pictorial form and pictorial relationships. All these things are there. Okay, so what I am telling you, that if a proposition is analyzed, you will find elementary proposition, and elementary proposition further be analyzed into names, and names cannot be analyzed. Name cannot further be analyzed. Now, what is a name according to Wittgenstein? A name denotes an object. A name denotes an object. If a name fails to denote an object, it is no longer a name. So the meaning of the name is the meaning of the object. So there is an essential correlation between a name and an object. So this is how Wittgenstein is actually developed the phenomenal picture theory of meaning in his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, having two sides. One is language side, another is reality side. And language is articulated, reality is also articulated. And Wittgenstein did everything within this, within his solipsistic world. What I am telling you, that is my language and my world. It is designated to me as a solipsistic world. So this is all about of the semantic model of Wittgenstein. Now, if you come to I think Frege, you find a different interpretation of semantics. That is the different interpretation of proper name. Now, just to make a comparison between Frege to Wittgenstein and Russell, what Frege has said. Frege said the famous distinction, that is the distinction between sense and reference. And this this famous article actually brings two philosophical resolution, two important philosophical resolution. It solves the problem of identity, and second, it solves the problem of empty proper name. So these are two big problems which remains unsolved before the appearance of sense and reference actually has been solved with the appearance of sense and reference as introduced by Frege. Now, Frege actually developed the sense theory of proper name. Sense theory of proper name, which is contrary to Russell's logical proper name. Russell, as I have already mentioned, developed the no sense theory of reference. Now it is just a very contrary to that. Now Frege says that every propernem has sense. Don't confuse sense with the meaning. Frege actually make a subtle distinction between sense and meaning. Other philosophers equate a sense with meaning. Frege did not. So my humble submission is to particularly student, don't confuse a sense with the term as a meaning. Meaning according to Frege is different from sense. Now sense is the mood of presentation. What do you mean by mood of presentation? That is, the mood of presentation is nothing but a different interpretation of the same thing. Say for example, that is if I talk about Rabindranath Tagore, I can talk in terms of the Nobel laureate of Rabindranath Tagore in terms of Nobel Prize. I can also talk in terms of the writer of Gitanjali. I can talk in terms of the person who born in Santiniketan and West Bengal in Calcutta. So the term Rabindranath Tagore has been given in a different mood of interpretation or mood of presentation. So in this sense, now the beauty always understand is that it is comprehensive. According to Frege, any linguistic terms whatsoever, if it has a sense, it should be regarded as a proper name. Any linguistic items, either phrase or clause or a part of a sentence or anything imaginary or whatever it may be, if it is a sense or on the mood of presentation, if it can be expressed in different linguistic form, it can be regarded as a proper name. Okay, so Frege actually incorporates various types of proper name, and it is comprehensive in nature. Okay, and Frege did it just simply because actually he emphasized on the sense or mood of a presentation. According to Frege, that is, the sense of a proper name is primary and the reference is secondary. Frege does not deny the concept of reference, but he has a different perception of the concept of reference. Unlike the other semantics, Frege interprets a reference in various senses: direct reference, indirect reference, reference in terms of presupposition, reference in terms of imagination, and so on and so forth. And another important aspect of Frege's theory is that actually he brings the concept of thought in order to understand the concept of sense of a sentence. And this actually makes a huge difference of his semantic implication from other philosophers. Okay, so sense, what is the sense? Sense is the complete sense. By the term sense, Frege means the concept. Frege means the thought. The the complete sense of a sentence is determined on the basis of the thought. And in this regard, Frege actually classifies three different level of thought. That is assertion, apprehension, and judgment. There are three different levels of thought. One is assertion level, another is apprehension level, another is judgment level. So on the basis of three level, Frege actually tries to understand three different types of references. Three different types of references. So when Frege was talking about the reference, his reference is not very similar to Russell, not very similar to Kripke, not very similar to Mill, or not very similar to other. His interpretation of reference has diverse, has various level. One is cognized in the apprehension level, another is cognized in the assertion level, another is cognized in the judgmental level. So Frege actually tries to understand the concept of reference directly, indirectly, reference in terms of presupposition, reference in terms of imagination. And that's why it is possible for Frege to accommodate empty proper name under the realm or under the sphere of proper name. So Frege actually solved two important problems. One is the problem of the identity, and another is the problem of empty proper name. I'm talking about the empty proper name. Now just a bit, just a glance, try to understand about the concept of identity. Now you know that the concept of identity in another mode actually introduced by Leibniz long back. It is called the principle of indiscernible. It is called the principle of indiscernible long back. Leibniz introduced the concept of identity in the name of principle of indiscernible. That is, A is identical with A. Now this theory functions over the history, but Frege actually Frege finds the problems with this theory. And in this regard, Frege brings the two sentences. Frege says the two sentences having different senses may have same referent. If it would be so, then the Leibnizian principle of identity is incapable to overcome this problem. Okay, so the morning star and the evening star, the two sentences, the morning star and the evening star, they are those two sentences having different senses. That is, the star that rises in the morning is called morning star, and the star that rises in the evening is called evening star. So they have the different senses, but they have the same referent. So how can we actually overcome this problem with the help of the principle of indiscernible expressed in the form of A is identical with A? We cannot do it. So in this regard, Frege actually has introduced the concept of informative identity, that is A is identical with B. So two problems that have been solved by Frege with the introduction of his celebrated principle article, sense and reference. One is the problem of identity, another is the problem of empty proper name. Now, the problem of empty proper name is again a revolutionary. Now, if metaphysics was defaulted, if metaphysics was rejected because of empty proper name, because of imaginary object, because of high fantasy, then what is wrong with the empty proper name? So, if the empty proper name has been accepted under the orbit of linguistic philosophy, then what is wrong with metaphysics? Then again the question arises. So there is all about a clarification and interpretation. But linguistic philosophers are very shrewd. They are a fifth generation philosophers. Okay, and metaphysicians failed to tackle with them. There was an intellectual conflict, nothing else. As I have already mentioned, in philosophy there is nothing absolutely certain. You do not find any single philosophical theory which is unquestioned begging. Every philosophical theory has scope of criticizing. Okay, so I think that actually metaphysicians at that time actually intellectually roped by the fifth generation or fourth generation linguistic philosopher, having scientific background, having technological background, and having the other background as well. So metaphysics, actually, I'm sorry for the metaphysician, because metaphysician failed to tackle certain linguistic revolution. Okay, and metaphysics has been demolished. But still, I can say that there are metaphysics. There are metaphysics in logic. There are metaphysics even in 20th century, and there will be metaphysics even 21st century. So there is nothing wrong in metaphysics, but we must be careful about speculative metaphysics. I am taking a few minutes with reference to Immanuel Kant, and then I close my chapter, because it continues long and long. There is no ending point. So metaphysics is there. I am sorry for the metaphysician. I am sorry for the metaphysician. This is my own personal realization that metaphysicians in the 18th century or the 19th century failed to tackle the intellectual wave of the linguistic philosophers having scientific background. Now, what is wrong with metaphysics? Metaphysics is still there, and the logicians are doing metaphysics. When we're talking about a possible world, or possible world or cross world mechanisms, okay, we are doing a metaphysics. When we are doing something in logical worlds, we are doing metaphysics. Space and times are metaphysical concept. So, but not all metaphysical issues such has been rejected, but only speculative metaphysics. Okay, and in this regard, I should remember Immanuel Kant. Kant actually divided into three different types of the reason. One is a pure reason that has been developed in his critique of pure reason. Another is a practical reason that has been developed in his groundwork of metaphysics of moral. And third reason is that speculative reason. And Kant vehemently rejected the relevance of speculation in philosophy. Kant confined philosophy either under the realm of pure reason, where epistemology, philosophy of science, mathematics coming under the head, or practical reasons under ethics, aesthetic, religions, and such things will come. Okay, so but there is no scope of speculation in metaphysics. So when I am talking against metaphysics, I am particularly talking against speculative metaphysics. I am not talking about other metaphysics. I just remember Kant, that is metaphysics of natural disposition is possible. I again repeat and close my lecture that metaphysics of natural disposition is possible. So metaphysics in general nature should not be rejected and cannot be rejected. Philosophy cannot survive without the contribution of metaphysics. But metaphysics should be revisited. That is metaphysics of natural disposition. We need to survive our philosophy. So I am a profounder of metaphysics, but I am a profounder of metaphysics with certain reservation, and in this regard, I am a bit of conscience. Thank you very much, Professor K.C. Pandey and others.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your wonderful and intelligent talk. And I'm sure so many questions, doubts are awaiting. So I would like to invite Professor K.C. Pandey to take up the question answer session.
First of all, I would like to say something in Hindi. मेरे एक विद्यार्थी रहे हैं पीएचडी के, वो आजकल मेरठ में हैं, असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर, आई थिंक ही इज़ हियर, डॉक्टर हितेश कुमार सिंह। सो उन्होंने कहा कि कुछ हिंदी वालों के लिए भी आप कुछ मिनट में बोल दीजिए। तो मैं कुछ मिनट में अपने विद्यार्थी की बात रखते हुए हिंदी में जो विद्यार्थी हैं उनके लिए कुछ संक्षेप में प्रोफेसर दास ने जो कुछ भी अभी अभिव्यक्त किया है, हिंदी माध्यम विद्यार्थियों के लिए कुछ कहने की कोशिश करता हूँ। सभी कुछ तो संभव नहीं है, और मैं समझता हूँ कि प्रोफेसर दास इससे खुश भी होंगे, क्योंकि उन्हीं की बातों को दूसरी भाषा में अभिव्यक्त किया जा रहा है। तो सबसे पहली बात तो यह है कि प्रोफेसर दास ने बहुत ही गूढ़ विषय को बहुत ही सरलतम भाषा में अभिव्यक्त किया है। हालांकि कुछ कमेंट्स आ रहे थे कि प्रोफेसर दास बहुत फास्ट जा रहे हैं अपने डिलीवरेशंस में, थॉट्स में। कई बार ऐसा होता है कि जो थिंकर होता है उसको पकड़ना मुश्किल होता है उसकी स्पीच में, लेकिन कुछ बातें ऐसी हैं जो कि मुझे लगता है कि रखना चाहिए हिंदी में। तो प्रोफेसर दास ने सबसे पहले शुरू किया अपना जो अभिभाषण, अपना जो व्याख्यान है, उसमें सबसे पहले उन्होंने बताया कि दर्शन में क्रांति की अवधारणा क्या होती है, क्रांति का कॉन्सेप्ट क्या है, क्रांति का संप्रत्यय क्या है दर्शन में। तो कूपरनिकियन एक क्रांति है। उसके बाद इन्होंने बताया कि लिंग्विस्टिक जो कि भाषाई क्रांति क्या होती है। भाषाई क्रांति से तात्पर्य ये है कि तार्किक भाववाद जो शुरुआत होती है भाषाई क्रांति की, तो ये मान लिया गया कि तत्वमीमांसी कथन जो है वह निरर्थक होते हैं, अपलाप होते हैं, जिनका कोई अर्थ नहीं होता है। फिर इसके बाद फिलॉसफी क्या बचती है, वो भाषाई दर्शन बचता है। तो दर्शन का तात्पर्य है भाषाई दर्शन। इसके बाद प्रोफेसर दास ने विटगेन्स्टाइन के टैक्टिटस से कुछ बातें बताईं, जिसके अनुसार कि फ़िलोसॉफिकल प्रॉब्लम्स क्या होती हैं। फिर आपने जो है वो विटगेन्स्टाइन के फ़िलोसॉफिकल इन्वेस्टिगेशन से बताया कि फ़िलोसॉफिकल प्रॉब्लम्स बेसिकली तब उत्पन्न होती हैं जब भाषा अवकाश पर चली जाती है। अर्थात अवकाश पे जाने का तात्पर्य विटगेन्स्टाइन का ये था कि भाषा जब गलत ढंग से अभिव्यक्त की जाती है। फिर फ़िलासफ़ी जो है वह बेसिकली जो यूजर सेंट्रिक हो जाती है। तो अगर कोई समस्या उत्पन्न होती है दर्शन शास्त्र में, तो जो भाषा को प्रयोग कर रहा है उसकी अपनी कमियों के कारण ही भाषा में समस्या उत्पन्न होती है। तो आपने बहुत अच्छी तरह से भाषाई दर्शन और भाषा दर्शन, लिंग्विस्टिक फ़िलासफ़ी और फिलॉसफी ऑफ लैंग्वेज में अंतर किया, और ये बताया कि जो भाषाई दर्शन है उसका संदर्भ जो है वो दार्शनिक पद्धति से होता है, जबकि जो भाषा का दर्शन है उसका संदर्भ जो है वह मुख्य रूप से जो दार्शनिक संप्रत्यय हैं, जैसे ट्रुथ और अर्थ इत्यादि की पुनर्व्याख्या या व्याख्या से या उसकी स्पष्टीकरण से होता है। तो आपने ये स्पष्ट किया कि आपका जो संदर्भ यहाँ पे है, आपका जो विषय है वह है भाषाई दर्शन से, और आपने बताया कि भाषाई जो दर्शन है वो ये एक दार्शनिक मेथड है, दार्शनिक पद्धति है, उसी प्रकार से जैसे कि कार्टेशियन मेथड है, और उसी प्रकार से जैसे कि फिनोमेनोलॉजिकल मेथड है, जिस प्रकार से देकार्त की पद्धति थी, जिस प्रकार से समृद्धिवाद की पद्धति थी, उसी प्रकार से दार्शनिक पद्धति जो है वो लिंग्विस्टिक फिलॉसफी या भाषाई दर्शन है। और फिर यह भी आपने स्पष्ट कर दिया कि हालांकि आपका जो संदर्भ है वो भाषाई दर्शन से है, लेकिन आप जो है वह यह मानते हैं कि भाषाई दर्शन और भाषा का दर्शन दोनों एक दूसरे से जुड़े हुए हैं। फिर आपने यह स्पष्ट किया कि जो किस प्रकार से जो भाषाई दर्शन है वह भी दो प्रकार की दो प्रकार से है, दो तरह का है। एक तरह का है जो कि ऑर्डिनरी लैंग्वेज की फिलॉसफी करते हैं, साधारण भाषा का दर्शन करते हैं, और दूसरा है जो कि आइडियल लैंग्वेज का दर्शन करते हैं, आदर्श भाषा की बात करते हैं। फिर उसके बाद आपने स्पष्ट किया कि किस प्रकार से आप यह देख सकते हैं कि सीमेंटिक्स क्या है और प्रैग्मेटिक्स क्या है, व्याकरण क्या है, और किस प्रकार से भाषाई दर्शन की व्याख्या होती है आगे चल करके आइडियल लैंग्वेज जो कि आर्टिफिशियल लैंग्वेज की बात करते हैं, आदर्श भाषा क्या है और कृत्रिम भाषा क्या है। तो आपने फिर आगे जा कर के बर्ट्रैंड रसल के एक पेपर के बारे में बहुत अच्छी तरह से व्याख्यायित किया, नॉलेज बाय एक्वेंटेंस एंड नॉलेज बाय डिस्क्रिप्शन। मैं भी अपने विद्यार्थियों से ये अपील करता हूँ कि आप इस पेपर को अवश्य पढ़ें, यह अत्यंत आधारभूत है। कई विद्यार्थी पढ़ भी चुके हैं जो रिसर्च वाले हैं, लेकिन जो पीजी के हैं, यूजी के हैं, उनको भी इसको पढ़ना ही है। और फिर आपने प्रॉपर नेम का एक कॉन्सेप्ट है जो मौलिक नाम का संप्रत्यय है, उसके बारे में आपने बताया कि यह क्या है। फिर लॉजिकली प्रॉपर नेम के बारे में आपने स्पष्ट किया, और आपने बताया कि जो अनुभविक रूप से असंभव है वह तार्किक रूप से संभव किस प्रकार से होता है। विटगेनस्टाइन में आकर के आपने टैक्टिटस और फिलोसॉफिकल इन्वेस्टिगेशंस की बहुत अच्छी तरह से व्याख्या की, पिक्चर थियरी ऑफ मीनिंग, किस प्रकार से अकॉर्डिंग टू विटगेनस्टाइन जो है वो यह जो जगत है किस प्रकार से तथ्यों का बना हुआ है। फिर आपने फ्रेगे के संदर्भ में सेंस और रेफरेंस की चर्चा इतनी अद्भुत ढंग से स्पष्ट रूप से किया है। और फिर आपने बताया कि फ्रेगे ने यह सेंस और रेफरेंस पेपर में मुख्य रूप से इनका चर्चा का विषय क्यों है। अगर यह आपसे प्रश्न किया जाता है, तो प्रश्न अगर आपसे किया जाता है कि फ्रेगे की इस पेपर में मुख्य बात क्या है, तो आप ये कह सकते हैं कि फ्रेगे अपने इस लेख के द्वारा दो प्रकार की दार्शनिक समस्याओं का सोल्यूशन बताते हैं, डिसोल्यूशन बताते हैं, हल करते हैं समस्याएं। वो एक है समस्या है प्रॉब्लम ऑफ आइडेंटिटी की, तादात्म्य की समस्या है, और दूसरी है प्रॉब्लम ऑफ इम्प्टी प्रॉपर नेम की, जो ऐसे प्रॉपर नेम है, ऐसे ऐसे जो मौलिक नाम हैं जिनके करस्पॉन्डिंग कोई ऑब्जेक्ट नहीं है इन द वर्ड, जिसके संवादी में कोई सत्ता नहीं है, जो कि जिसकी रिक्त मौलिक नाम है। तो उसके बारे में किस प्रकार से यह पेपर बात करता है कि उसका अर्थ भी हो सकता है, हालांकि उस कॉन्सेप्ट के करस्पॉन्डिंग कोई सत्ता नहीं होती है। फ्रेगे के और भी चर्चा आपने किया। फिर आपने बताया कि किस प्रकार से सेंस जो है वो थॉट है, और आपने ये बताया कि किस प्रकार से फ्रेगे ने अंतर किया है सेंस और मीनिंग में। तो सेंस और मीनिंग में जो फ्रेगे का अंतर है, मैं समझता हूँ विटगेनस्टाइन भी स्वीकार करते हैं टैक्टिटस में। और किस प्रकार से तीन प्रकार के लेवल्स के बारे में आपने बात किया सेंस और थॉट के संदर्भ में, असर्शन, एप्रीहेंशन और जजमेंट। और आपने बहुत अच्छी तरह से बताया कि मेटाफिजिक्स जो है वो बेसिकली महत्वपूर्ण एक अंग है दर्शन का। और मेटाफिजिशियंस बेसिकली वो जो थे, उन्होंने भाषाई दार्शनिकों के प्रश्नों का, क्योंकि भाषाई दार्शनिक जो है लॉजिकल और साइंटिफिक टूल से युक्त थे, तो उनके प्रश्नों का उत्तर नहीं दे पाए। लेकिन वास्तव में तत्वमीमांसा का स्थान दर्शन में है, और तत्वमीमांसा जो है वो एक महत्वपूर्ण डिस्कोर्स है दर्शन शास्त्र में। तो मुख्य रूप से आपने कांट की भी चर्चा इसमें किया अंत में, और किस प्रकार से कांट जो है वो काल्पनिक तत्वमीमांसा के पक्ष में नहीं थे, स्पेकुलेटिव मेटाफिजिक्स के विरोध में थे। तो मुख्य रूप से मैं संक्षिप्त में इन सब बातों को यहाँ पे इसलिए रखा हूँ कि हिंदी माध्यम के विद्यार्थी भी स्पष्ट रूप से प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं। इस बीच प्रोफेसर DN यादव वाइस चांसलर नीलांबर पीताम्बर यूनिवर्सिटी से ज्वाइन कर चुके हैं। हम प्रोफेसर DN यादव सर का भी हार्दिक अभिनंदन करते हैं, स्वागत करते हैं हमसे जुड़ने के लिए। अब क्वेश्चंस जो है अलाउड है, यू कैन आस्क योर क्वेश्चंस and you can raise your questions in the chat box so that I can invite personally to that person to come and dais and ask question. So first of all, I think I got a question from uh, one from Delhi University, Dr. Chopra. Is Dr. Chopra here? Dr. Chopra of Delhi University.
Yeah. I'm present,
Navneet,
Doctor.
Dr. Navneet
Professor.
Chopra, if you would like to ask your question, you can come and unmute your video and audio and you can ask question directly to Professor Das, who is our
Yeah.
WPS member and known to all of us. Well, we are all friends. So I think Professor Das would like to talk to you as well.
Okay, thank you, Professor Pandey. Yeah, so am I audible?
You are audible,
Yes,
but
yes.
you are not visible, I
Okay.
suppose.
Yeah. I have my video. I have closed deliberately
Okay, all right,
so as to facilitate the communication here.
all right.
Okay, yeah. So my worry is regarding. Just a second. Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, very much.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just concerned about that there's a presupposition here in philosophy of language, in analytical philosophy, that language, the structure of language is similar to the structure of thought, and so that gives us that indicates that thought is constituted in terms of language. So why merely because of similarity of structure we should buy this idea? I mean, there are certain phenomena like what will you say about the tip of the tongue phenomenon, where I say that I want to say something, but I'm not getting the right word. So that indicates that I have a definite meaning in my mind and I'm not finding the right words. So I'm struggling for the right words. So I am opposing this view that we really require language to constitute thought. So I would like to have response on this.
Thank you. Very. I think it's a very interesting issue actually. I think when we talk about semantics,
Yeah.
we are talking about semantics with a precise philosophical background. Okay. You mentioned that you have some concept or any majority object, whatever it may be, but you do not find any language which is suitable for
Yeah.
expressing it,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Right.
But for them, this should not be regarded as a suitable language under their paradigm. Okay. For them, language must be proper name, and there is a logical presupposition that every proper name must refer to an object, either in terms of denotation or in terms of connotation. So this is there actually the domain of exercising the relationship between language and reality. Now, your point is that perhaps I think the ordinary language, that is the paradigm of the pragmatics, will cover your issue. I did not enter into this issue, sir.
Okay.
So all right, Professor Rakesh Chandra sir, you can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Das, for a very encyclopedic and a beautiful lecture. I was just wondering about two small things which I think are bound to come in a presentation like this. The distinction that you draw between linguistic philosophy and philosophy of language is very important. But what I found from the beginning of your lecture to the end is that you are identifying linguistic philosophy too closely with the ideas of logical positivism. The rejection of metaphysics is only something which key to logical positivism. The whole Cambridge school does not necessarily reject metaphysics. And if you would remember, in Russell, 1918, the last section is on what there is. And as you quoted Wittgenstein, he talks about the world as the totality of facts. Now, all these statements are metaphysical statements about the nature of reality, as it were. The identification of metaphysics only with idealist metaphysics, I think, is a big mistake. And most of these people were rejecting idealism of their times, of their own teachers like McTaggart and Bradley, and thinking that in rejecting them, they were rejecting all metaphysics, not recognizing the fact that realism is also a metaphysics. So that's one thing which I think needs clarification. The other thing which I also wanted to call your attention to, that analytical philosophy and linguistic philosophy also need to be a little more carefully distinguished. Analytical philosophy uses linguistic methods very strongly, but not all analytical philosophy is only linguistic philosophy. Thirdly, and more importantly, I thought that in the second part of your paper or of your presentation, you come to substantial issues about the nature of proper names, theories of Russell and Frege about the question of rigid designation, etc., etc. Now, those are actual proper objects of philosophy of language. That how in language a proper name functions, does it function non-denotatively or denotatively? When you are talking about logically proper names, are they really part of language, or are they like paralinguistic gestures? Now, those are issues about language, and they would legitimately come under philosophy of language. So this kind of a careful distinction, which you are constantly reminding us, has not been so carefully maintained in the presentation itself. And that, I think, is a difficulty, which I am reminded that when you remember that very old classic book by Rorty, the edited book, the introduction is itself about metaphilosophical difficulties in linguistic philosophy. And what are the metaphilosophical difficulties? I think we should remember that, as you said in the very beginning, all revolutionaries try to say that the earlier people were completely wrong. But they begin as if they have no presuppositions. While the fact is that these revolutionaries themselves come with strong presuppositions. And in this case, the presupposition is of realist metaphysics and empiricist epistemology. So I was just wanting that this could become a little more clear. I know you believe in this, but for the benefit of everybody, I thought that this needed a little more fleshing out. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. I think it's a beautiful observation, covering so many aspects, Rakesh. Regarding metaphysics, I think there is such a more scope to discuss in very other dimension as well. Okay, so now my point is that that any interpretation of metaphysics is begging a question in the real sense of the term. Now I answer to the metaphysics in favor of the metaphysics, not deny the whole metaphysics. Okay. Now, the actually issue of linguistic revolutions or semantics in general is itself actually passes through a turmoil revision, so to speak. Actually, the inauguration was okay, but after that there we find a lot of modification, lot of permutation, lot of communication, and it is going on even in today's as well. If you go through McDowell, Davidson, and other, now people are talking about interpretations, understanding, and the intrinsic value of nature, and the normativity, and so on and so forth. Okay, so actually to confine ourselves within a particular domain and take it as a final conclusion is itself a defeating. So what I had a claim in my lecture, it should not be treated as a final observation. There are the other perspective from which you may attack myself or anybody else, whatever it may be. But as far as my understanding goes, even as today, I believe as a student of philosophy that in the realm of philosophy, metaphysics actually holds the central issue. Now, what is metaphysics? I should not confine it within the conventional definition of metaphysics. This metaphysics is something beyond the empirical world, or having no physical attachment and so on and so forth. I do not confine, because in today's, in the 21st century, we have a different interpretation of metaphysics altogether. Okay, so in the real sense of the term, if you are a little bit of a liberal and giving space to metaphysics, then you will find the flavor of metaphysics in everywhere. Okay, so please do not confine the metaphysics within a particular domain or particular direction. But metaphysics actually is the essence of philosophy. The flavors of which is covers every bit of I think issue of a philosophical discussion. This is all about regarding the metaphysics. So you are right. Okay, I do not deny you. And regarding your linguistic philosophy and analytic philosophy, yes, you are right, sir. That is initially philosophy from undergraduates actually begins with the perception of analytic as a philosophy. Now again, there is a modification, permutation, and commutation. Now, what is the initially what is the analytic philosophy? That is, you just mention just you can mention the name of this classic of analytic philosophy. Now, if you compare it to the that is the articles appear in the classical analytic philosophy of environment, you will find the reference of each and every article in the sphere of linguistic philosophy or philosophy of language. So actually, the innovation of our philosophy of language or linguistic philosophy in some sense or other was there under the home of the analytical philosophy. But again, the development is going on, and philosophy there is a continuous revision, adding interpretation, and so on and so forth. And now we are in the process of linguistic philosophy or philosophy of language. But keeping in mind that one thing I should share with you, that is the division is very close. Okay, the division is very close. I think there is no clear cut division. As if you discuss one thing, you should take the reference of other thing. Okay, but there is a family resemblance as far as business and concern. That is analytic philosophy, philosophy of language, and linguistic philosophy, overlapping similarity and dissimilarity. They belong to the same family. These things which I can tell you. And the third one is actually Rakesh here, please. Rakesh.
Yeah.
All right, sir.
Okay.
Sir, Professor Pandeji, good afternoon. This is Sambasiva Prasad speaking.
Okay, Professor Prasad. Yeah.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. Could I participate and put a question, sir?
Yeah, sure. You're allowed, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sir, Professor Arpana Dhardas ji, and I'm very happy to listen to your talk today. And say congratulations for a very
Arpana Dhoddas.
yeah. Pardon?
Hello, sir. Arpana Dhoddas. Who is Arpana Dhoddas?
Oh, he's saying your connection, sir.
Yes.
Oh, that,
Sir, congratulations, sir, for successfully presenting a very lucid paper, and I enjoyed your lecture. Sir, my question is a very simple question. Here, what I want to tell you, just ask you is, the analytic philosophy, it has started with the aim of refuting the metaphysical propositions, and they say that all metaphysical propositions are meaningless in the sense they don't have any reference in the external world. Okay, but this kind of revolution, which started with the object of rejecting metaphysical propositions, finally it has ended with a conclusion that after all, the metaphysical propositions, metaphysics is meaningful because it goes beyond language, and it goes outside the circle of language. Actually, this philosophy, the philosophers, logical philosophers, they took the cue from Wittgenstein's Tractatus. But subsequently, Wittgenstein himself has come to the conclusion in his later works that the metaphysics, it goes beyond language. It is something that cannot be expressed in language. It is outside language. Therefore, the aim with which the analytic philosophy started, I mean the linguistic philosophy or linguistic turn it started, ultimately it has failed in the last end. This is only my observation. I request you to kindly comment on this.
No, no. Actually, but I do not think that it is a failure. I do not think so. Rather, the color of the inauguration of analytic philosophy or earlier tradition of analytic philosophy has changed radically with the interpretation and addition of the new generation. This is what I can. But I do not think that it is a failure at all. Thank you, sir.
Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
sir.
Specialist
Not at all,
Thank you,
answer.
sir.
Yeah,
Not at
yeah.
all failure.
Expert answer.
Thank you, sir.
Expert answer, Professor Das. You have given the
Thank
expert answer to Sambasiva Prasad, sir. And we will be welcoming you in the weeks to come on this platform.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the next question is being asked by Rinku Behra. Rinku Behra is available here? Hello, Rinku.
Sir,
Rinku.
am I-
Yeah, you
am
can
I
ask.
audible, sir?
Yeah, please ask your question.
Sir, my question is, what would be the answer of ordinary language philosophers to the issue relating vagueness of language? And is ordinary language capable to deal with the borderline cases of language?
Okay. So Professor Das will answer this question. Yeah.
Yeah, of course that it is because just as you remember the famous remark of Wittgenstein that the ordinary language touches the stream of human life. Just remember this line, you will find the answer. Ordinary language is capable of expressing everything. Okay, because I think this remark is more than sufficient for answering any vagueness. Okay, so ordinary language survives within the vagueness. There is a continuous revision going within the ordinary language. So if you find one term one vague term in ordinary language, you interpret and reinterpret it in terms of another term which makes it clear. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you
So
very much.
wonderful. This is basically that you have to see the things in context. If you take Wittgenstein, so things which are vague in a particular context may not be that vague in another context. So
Yes.
that is wonderful. I think that Professor Das has replied to all the questions and has presented wonderfully well. So if there is any other question, then all right. Otherwise, if there is any other person to ask any question, yeah.
So,
Bhaskar.
thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Kantiral Das, sir.
yeah.
So, it's a very wonderful lecture delivered by you. But, sir, I have in my mind
Huh?
a thinking that is, sir, perhaps I may be wrong in this context that
तो मैं कैसे कर सकता हूँ बेटा?
if metaphysics is the study of being
कहाँ से बोल रहे हो?
or reality, how metaphysics being placed to
किसी
quarantine
कॉलेज में ले लो अगर ALU में
or so sir, metaphysics is all inclusive, it cannot be segregated from any kind of philosophy. Sir, what do you answer in this regard?
Okay, thank you, Bhaskar. Actually, I actually use the term metaphorically.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Yes. Thank
Yeah, Wittgenstein too can used so much metaphor. Language
Yes,
game,
yes,
resemblance, language goes on holiday, beautsman of language, and so I actually that's today actually I think there is a similarity, very similarity that is the metaphysical, the metaphysician position at the time of linguistic revolution and the COVID patient nowadays. Okay. Now,
Yes.
what is happening in the case of a COVID patient? Now, if somebody is COVID positive, he's quarantined, he maintains the social distancing, and he's confined within a particular room under locking system. Okay, so at that time, when linguistic revolution came, the metaphysical institution was like that. They were sidelined, they were disintegrated, they were neglected, they were designated a dead body, just like that. So it's a bit of imagination that you can do.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
I suppose that all the questions are answered by Professor Das, and his smile is the sign that the lecture was successful. And is Mansi
It
there?
is all pleasure for you, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Mansi, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to invite Professor K.C. Pandey to deliver a vote of thanks.
Oh,
Over to you, sir.
okay. So I'm grateful.
Pandey,
I'm grateful to
Pandey ji.
everybody. Yeah, I'm grateful
Professor
to.
Pandey ji,
Yeah,
KC Pandey ji, KC
Yeah.
Pandey ji.
yeah.
Hello,
Hello.
KC Pandey ji.
जी बताएं.
Huh? I was waiting for my turn.
Oh, Professor. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Please come.
Actually, I have not gone through the entire lecture of Professor Das, but I have some observation and some queries because I'm not in position to comment as a, you can say, the expertise. So, if permit, Professor Das, you permit, let me say something.
Yeah, allowed, sir. Allowed.
Definitely a pleasure, sir. You please go ahead.
Uh, your lecture was really very interesting and a very, you can say, just exhaustive and so serious lecture. It is my
Thank you,
I
sir.
am
Thank you.
unfortunate that I could have not gone through the entire because I was busy. Although Kasi Pandey has informed me very long before ago, and he also informed me that your lecture is started. One thing which we generally in the history of Western philosophy observe the two kinds of analysis, that is conceptual analysis and linguistic analysis.
Yes.
Another thing, there are two stages of philosophy which you can say the first revolution philosophy that in the form of Kant, Copernican revolution, and second observe as the linguistic, as I think it is your topic also, linguistic revolution. I think something like this.
Yes, sir. Linguistic revolution. Linguistic revolution.
So the second kind of revolution is observed in the philosophy of language. Because in the first revolution, Copernican revolution, reality was expressed in form of thought. So there was a tendency to relate our reality with thought, to express the reality through the thought. But Kant, in Kant philosophy, Copernican system is supposed to be the first revolution that is related to conceptual analysis.
Yes, sir.
The
Yes, sir.
second is supposed to be, that is also till the linguistic term, when reality is expressed in language through thought. It means there was a tendency, or there is a tendency to express the reality in terms of thought and language both. So let another thing, I think in future, let us discuss, or some people have started discussing the third kind of revolution we should try to see in phenomenology.
Yes.
In phenomenology, there also we should have to discuss the metaphysics, language, intensity of consciousness, all these things. So I think let us try to discuss and try to think of another kind of revolution, philosophical revolution, and Husserl's philosophy. So these are my observation, very light observation. So one thing which is my query, that was two things. You have a very beautifully distinguished between linguistic philosophy and philosophy of language. And K.C. Pandey also explained it better way, that a phonological method like phonological method, analytical method, pragmatic method, all these kinds of method, they are related to linguistic philosophy and philosophy of language. When we try to explain the terms of the language, there are Moore, Wittgenstein, and these are philosophers. Russell, they are supposed to be the philosopher of language. But one thing, so this is very good thing, and we need also some more clarification how to, because Professor Chandra also raised this question, how to make more clear, how to distinguish in a very clear way the linguistic philosophy and the philosophy of language for the student and for the scholars, or particularly for the new students of philosophy of our. This another is my question. Because I am not in a position just now, right now, to understand or to explain. You have made a distinction between speculative philosophy and other kind, metaphysics and other kind of metaphysics. Speculative philosophy, metaphysics and other kinds of metaphysics. I think metaphysics, whatever, what way we can define the metaphysics, there may be different grounds to refute the metaphysics, or to prove the nonsense of metaphysics, or to prove, eradicate the metaphysics. So there may be different grounds in order to refute the metaphysics. For example, Kant has a different ground, Hume has a different ground, logical process is different ground, and some other may have different ground in order to refute, in order to eliminate metaphysics. But metaphysics is metaphysics, and metaphysics means which is beyond our experience, which are non-spatial, non-temporal, beyond space and time. That is a very common thing we can say about metaphysics. The metaphysics may be whatever may be, and people may think according to their own, according to their philosophy, but there may be different grounds for between the metaphysics. But how can we make difference the speculative metaphysics or other kind of metaphysics? What may be?
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay. I think that is the. Thank you, sir, for your beautiful observation. Two questions you have raised. One is for the sake of the students, the distinction between philosophy of language and linguistic as a philosophy. As I mentioned in my lecture, that the distinction is very subtle. The distinction is very subtle, and most of the linguistic philosophers have ignored the distinction in their writings. Only one philosopher, as I mentioned, the name of David Cooper, who in his book actually find the distinction between the linguistic philosophy and language. And I am the ardent follower of this distinction. Okay, the distinction is that again I tell for the sake of the students, that is, linguistic philosophy is a philosophical method. I tell you, linguistic philosophy is a philosophical method. Now, what is philosophical method, or what is the objective of linguistic philosophy as a philosophical method? Very simplistically, I can say that is, linguistic philosophy as a philosophical method tries to show the relationship between language and reality, judged by way of understanding the underlying meaning of language, the underlying logic of language. So this is what we call about linguistic philosophy as a philosophical method. Its main objective is to show the relationship between language and reality. There may be different types of language, there may be different types of reality, whatever it may be. But the position is very clear. On the other hand, philosophy of language actually deals with some linguistic concept. Again, I tell you, sir, some linguistic concept. What are the linguistic concept? Say, for example, denotation, connotation, meaning, reference, truth, deity, dicto, interpretation, understanding. These are the cup of tea of philosophy of language. Now, okay, now the point is that are these distinctions actually is very clear? Certainly it is not. Okay, they are two sides of the same coin. If you explain one, you engage with other. These things which I can say right now. And regarding metaphysics, I can say, sir, we are doing metaphysics in every day in philosophy, in every branch in philosophy. Okay, I have the honor in metaphysics. This is my personal view. I again repeat that a sudden attack of linguistic revolution, okay, on metaphysician, okay, metaphysician at that time failed to tackle or respond adequately to the wave of the linguistic revolution, because those who brought the linguistic revolution, they were much intellectual, and the present generation, that is the third or fourth generation, but metaphysicians were the fourth generation. Okay, so this was the intellectual battle, and I think metaphysician was completely surrendered the home of intellectual battle. But still, we are doing metaphysics. But as a student of philosophy, we must be careful and cautious about doing arbitrarily any kind of metaphysics, because then the gravity of a philosophy actually is don't. because we are living in the 21st century, sir. We are under the head of a civilization. So we cannot talk nonsense within the environment of civilization. These things I can tell.
Very good comment. Very
Thank you,
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
Thank you,
Das,
Professor Das.
and thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
thank you so much
Thank
for
you, sir.
thank you so much for presenting in such a wonderful and clear and distinct way. And it is so clear and distinct that everything is clear, and those inspirations scholars have got from you. Thank you for that, and I'm thankful to all those who have joined this Saturday seminar today throughout from the beginning till now, and many have joined new persons, and they might not be knowing that we do not provide e-certificates. This is just for Swanta Sukhai that we are delivering here, and we are enjoying discussions, and in days to come there are many more new scholars throughout India and abroad will deliver in Saturday seminar platform. I'm also grateful to Professor D.N. Yadav, Vice Chancellor, Pro Vice Chancellor of Nilambar Pitampar University, my supervisor, that he took time to join and to ask question. It's a great inspiration for all of us that Professor Yadav took some time out from his routine work, and instead of being so busy that he joined here today. So thank you very much, sir, and we look forward to you for joining on each Saturday hereafter. And I'm thankful to all those persons who ask questions. Professor Rakesh Chandra, always insightful in asking questions, and this gives all of us courage to move ahead. And Professor Rakesh Chandra sir is always available here to provide insights and to ask questions, so that actually philosophy becomes much more powerful. And what Wittgenstein says sometimes in PI, that book of philosophy could be written which consists of nothing but philosophical questions. So from that perspective, I suppose that it has been very good today that we have been asking so many questions, and we have been enjoying this discussion on philosophy of language and linguistic philosophy, and everybody is taking something at home from this discussion, from this lecture listening. And I'm grateful to all other those persons who ask questions, new questions, young scholars, and my friend Dr. Navneet Chopra from Delhi University, and Rinku Behra from Odisha, and many more. So I look forward to other Saturday seminars. Grateful to all those students and scholars, especially Mansi, and all those who joined today, Nikita, and other scholars who are very serious in joining this Saturday seminar. So see you till next Saturday seminar with some other speaker, and at the same time 10 minutes before 2 p.m. next time. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, sir. Once more, again, I express my heartfelt thanks to all of you, particularly Professor K.C. Pandey and the faculty members, and Jadov sir, and Prashad sir, Rakesh, and others for associating with me last 2 hours. Thank you very much, sir. Take care. Be safe. Thank you.